My name is Paul Craney. I'm a spokesperson for Massachusetts Fiscal Alliance. We're a nonprofit organization that acts like a watchdog and holds elected officials accountable and also educates the public. The reason for today's Zoom press conference is because this November, voters in Massachusetts are going to be asked for the 7th time to weigh in on a proposed graduated income tax. This is being proposed by the legislature, unlike the past 5 ballot questions, which were brought forward by citizens. And more recently, the 6th one was kicked out via the state Supreme Court. This is a legislative amendment to the state constitution that will allow lawmakers to raise the income tax by up to 80% for the first bracket they want to raise taxes on. Obviously, we are against it. The reason for today's Zoom call is because the proponents are going to continue to push propaganda and their talking points, and we wanted to clear the air on some of those talking points. So with us today, I'm going to hand it over to some folks, but with us today is State Representative David DeCoste, State Representative Colleen Garry, Representative Nick Boldyga, and Marc Lombardo. Also with us is Dr. David Tuerck, an economist at the Beacon Hill Institute, Chip Ford, who needs no introduction on this issue, the Executive Director of Citizens for Limited Taxation, and Chris Carlozzi, the State Director of the National Federation of Independent Businesses. We'll all kind of say a few words and then we'll open up the question and answer. My hope is to be done within a half an hour so folks could go on with their day. So with that, I want to hand it off to State Rep David DeCoste.
Paul, thank you very much. And I'll be brief. My name is Dave DeCoste. For those of you who don't know me, I represent Hanover, Norwell, and Rockland in the state legislature. I oppose this amendment because I believe it is flawed. The state constitution specifically prohibits earmarking funds revenue. And since the legislature appropriates the revenue, only the legislature will have the final word in terms of what will be spent and for what. The idea that these funds will somehow be fenced for transportation and education is really unrealistic. They have very broad categories, and many line items, to include pensions, could be considered to fall under these categories. And for that reason, I think this is a bad initiative and I will actively oppose it. I'll turn this over to my colleague from D-Dracut, Marc Lombardo.
Thank you, Rep. DeCoste. And I appreciate everyone coming together to talk about the latest press release about supposed support for a 80% tax increase on earners in Massachusetts. The reality is that the supporters of this proposal to raise taxes are being very misleading to the public. They are not being true with the data and the way that they're asking the questions. The suggestion that money will be earmarked is a false one, and it is one that the courts in the past have told the state that they need to correct in their messaging. And the constant propaganda of those who want to raise taxes on the hardworking families of the Commonwealth needs to come to an end. And we're here today to talk about the truth of the matter. The reality is that Massachusetts is flush with cash. We had over $5 billion in revenue above benchmark last year. Already halfway through the year, we were billions above benchmark. Massachusetts has money coming in. We have more than enough to fund these critical programs that we need without raising taxes on the hardworking families. And if we're going to put that proposal forward to the people of the Commonwealth, this should be done with truth and integrity and not with misleading headlines and class warfare here in the Commonwealth. And so we're here to speak truth to the issue today and make sure that we represent the hardworking families of the Commonwealth and say that this issue has to come forward in an ethical way, and we're going to make sure that the truth is out there. So thank you very much, and I'd pass it on to one of my fellow colleagues.
Rep. Garry, would you like to go?
Yes, thank you. I'm Representative Colleen Garry. I represent the towns of Dracut and Tingsboro, right on the New Hampshire border. So obviously, competition between two states is very, very important to how it affects our communities. I am in my 28th year as a state representative, and I had served as an aide for 8 years before that. The proponents of this question may have all of the goodwill to say that they would spend it on transportation education, but we can't assure that. I don't know how many times over the last 36 years, I would hear from somebody saying, well, the legislature promised us this, or the legislature promised us that. And it was past legislatures, and legislators got away with saying, well, I wasn't there then, and we need to spend it on this instead. So I think it's very, very important that the truth get out there to the voters, that this legislature might believe that they would spend it on education and transportation, but nothing will guarantee it going forward. And a constitutional convention and getting something through that and to the ballot and getting passed is a very difficult process. To reverse that is just as difficult. So I think that it's extremely important that the truth be put out there, that we cannot assure anyone that going forward, this money will be always spent on education and transportation. And it would be up to whatever legislature is in at that time to make that determination. And they can always say, I wasn't there when the promise was made, so I didn't make the promise. So I think it's really, really important that that be plain and simple to the voters when the ballot question comes up. And now I will turn it over to my colleague from Southwestern Mass, Representative Boldyga.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. Paul, thank you and your team for putting this together so quickly. I think all of us on the call realize that Americans, they vote with their feet when it comes to tax policy. Everyone here in the Commonwealth can agree upon that when the wealthiest of the residents of our state see the biggest tax increases, they are the people that actually have the resources to pack up and establish residency elsewhere. And I took some notes because I think we have some great examples just to the south. My entire district, as Rep. Garry mentioned, I'm in Western Massachusetts. My entire district borders Connecticut. And over the past 20 years, Connecticut has imposed 4 income tax hikes, raising the top rate to a staggering 77%. And since that time, Connecticut has actually ranked 49th in the state's private sector wage growth among everybody in the United States. So I think those numbers are staggering when we can see them, especially in a neighboring state. And I also took some other numbers because, wrote some other numbers down because these are so important. I didn't want to get them wrong. We saw over the last handful of years, some corporations come to Massachusetts from Connecticut because of the increased rates that we saw there. Between 2012 and 2018, Connecticut lost high earners at a rate only trailing Washington, D.C. On average, those who fled earned more than taxpayers who migrated into the state. And as a result, the amount of taxes paid by Connecticut's 100 top taxpayers plummeted 45% between 2015 and 2016 alone, despite the income tax increases in Connecticut. So I think each and every one of us knows here that's on the call today that raising taxes is actually only going to be a detriment to Massachusetts. The top earners in Massachusetts are going to flee the state in droves, and we're going to be left off in a much worse position. So this conversation is important. It's one that we need to have day in and day out. And also, I think some of my colleagues mentioned that we in the legislature know that you can't specifically earmark funds. So the money comes into the legislature and then we decide where it goes. And the causes of education and road repair obviously are very noble causes and one that each and every one of us is concerned with. However, that money coming in, if it does come in, which is still unsure to be seen, we're getting different results on how much money will come in, so we don't know yet, is not necessarily going to education and to fix roads. So thank you for putting this together, and I hope we can continue this conversation in the future.
Thank you, Rep. Boldyga. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. David Tuerck from the Beacon Hill Institute, and then shift forward, and then Chris Carlozzi is going to close.
Hi, Paul, and thank you for inviting me. My attention today was brought to a recent study from Tufts University, which takes a stab at estimating the revenue impact of the proposed millionaires tax. The proponents are claiming $2 billion more a year in revenue. That study came to something like 1.3 instead of 2 billion. And we did a study earlier that came to something like 1.2. So there's some similarity between their result and ours. However, that's the only similarity. Their study does not do what we do, which is to identify the effect on jobs, investment, disposable income in the state. And it's our argument that if you're going to ask the voters to approve this measure, you have to tell them what it's going to do to jobs, what it's going to do to investment, what it's going to do to disposable income. And we find that it's going to killed 9,000 jobs the first year. And then of that harm to the economy, a big chunk will be accomplished, will be due to outmigration of about 4,000 families. That's a much bigger number than the Tufts people come up with because we know our methodology and we know that it's academically solid and it's available to anybody to inspect who wants to go to our website, beaconhill.org. And because we believe in our methodology, we've been using it for some 30 years to make these kinds of estimates. We think that we're far closer to the mark than the other team is. We will lose lots of families because it's so easy to change domiciles. You simply decided you're going to spend another few days in the other state, and all of a sudden you're a resident of that state instead of Massachusetts. It's also going to be hurting small business because this is going to tax the profits of small business, which are what the small business use in order to engage in investment. The Tufts study makes some hints about how this tax is going to improve equity because it falls mainly on high income earners. But the Tufts study ignores the fact that it's going to cause job losses. And those job losses won't be limited to wealthy people. They'll be limited to they'll be extended. They will affect everybody. And among the people who will be affected are no doubt minorities, just as there will be majorities in those numbers. So the measure is not widely appreciated for the harm it will do to the economy. We think we've correctly documented that. And we think that the Tufts study today doesn't go far enough in terms of showing what it will do to the economy. And I guess at this point, I turn it over to Chip Ford, right?
Oh, thanks for putting this together. Here we go again. The sixth graduated income tax. Representative Garry, before I get started, I just wanted to point out how accurate you are. In 1989, the legislature promised it was going to temporarily increase the income tax to 6.25% for 18 months. We put it on the ballot in 2000. We rolled it back to, we tried to roll it back to 5%. The legislature froze it. We didn't get it back to 5%, never mind 18 months or 5 years or 10 years. It took CLT 30 years to keep the legislature's promise. So anybody who believes this money is going to be dedicated, earmarked for transportation and education, has failed to learn from history. Citizens for Limited Taxation was actually founded by Edward F. King in 1975 to oppose the fourth graduated income tax, and we defeated it on the ballot. It came back again in 1994. CLT again defeated it on the ballot. It's not a straightforward graduated income tax. There's always a gimmick to it. In 1994, they changed the income tax, or they attempted to change the income tax from a flat 5% to a graduated income tax. That would have been in the Constitution. Then they had the second question 6 and 7. 6 was the income tax, was the constitutional amendment. 7, they set the rates by statute. They were trying to sell voters that if they voted for it, their income tax rate would actually go down. The rich and wealthy would pay more. Of course, that would have been a bait to switch. That would have changed immediately. CLT's opposed graduated income tax, never really on the money issue, the tax issue, but on the fairness issue. And ironically, they're now calling this, the millionaire's tax, the Fair Share Amendment. What could be more fair than every productive taxpayer paying their tax at the same rate? That is the definition of fairness. So once again, here we are. We've got a deceptive bill, a deceptive ballot question, and it's got to be defeated again, because once this door to a flat tax is cracked open, we're going to have a graduated income tax. They can call it what they will, but we have two separate rates. How long before they're back for the third rate and the fourth rate? We've killed it 5 times before. We've got to kill it this time too. And I'll pass myself off to Chris Carlozzi next.
Thank you, Chip. I appreciate being here today and being able to highlight why I'm here to participate. My name is Christopher Carlozzi. I'm the State Director for the National Federation of Independent Business here in Massachusetts. We represent small business owners from across the state in all types of industries. And one of the groups often forgot about when the narrative goes forth on this issue is small businesses. We talk about it as if it's just going to impact high income earners, when the vast majority of those caught up and subjected to this tax are small businesses, job creators, the people that keep our state going. And in full disclosure, we were one of the plaintiffs in the last suit to remove the question from the ballot in 2018, and we continue to oppose this measure. We find it unfair to small businesses for several reasons. And first, it hurts investment. Small businesses who file as pass-through entities, things like subchapter S corporations, LLCs, groups like that, small businesses who are organized like that for tax purposes, they're going to be impacted by this. That's money that they use to reinvest in their business for job growth, for expansion, at a time when we are going to need job growth and expansion, when we are going to be in the midst of an economic recovery. Those businesses were impacted heavily by prolonged shutdowns and restrictions. And now some of them may be looking at higher taxes going forward at a time when they need to be growing and helping both the state to recover, as well as all these businesses. They need to recover. They need job growth. They need the individuals who lost paychecks to make sure they're earning again. And that will be impacted by these higher taxes. The other group would be small business owners that are retiring, business owners who have poured their sweat and tears and everything into their small businesses over a course of a lifetime, and then would retire. And now they'll be taxed at a higher rate, which is patently unfair to those business owners who use that as their retirement money. Not a lot of them have pensions or anything to that effect. They use the profits from the sale of their business when they cash out at the end, and now they'll be taxed at a higher rate. So it's very unfair to those small business owners as well. So that is why we continue to oppose this. We would like to make sure people remember that small businesses are going to be impacted by this. It's not just the wealthy income earners that you hear so much in the media about. It's those small neighborhood businesses that are in every corner of the state. So thank you, and I certainly entertain any questions when we get to that portion.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for joining today. Open it up to any media that has any questions. Just unmute yourself, state who you are, that would be helpful. And if there's any question directed to someone. All right, well, we may have left them speechless. Obviously, they can follow up with any of us. Again, the reason why we did this Zoom today is because of the study and the push-pull that misstates the ballot question reality. I think that's pretty clear from today's call. It's worth noting that if you know how to read polls, polls are done of likely voters. The poll that was done today is not likely voters, they're registered voters. And if you need any more evidence that the poll is way off, if you read the crosstabs, it shows that a majority, not a plurality, a majority of registered Republicans support this tax increase. Anyone that knows any registered Republican in this state knows they do not support raising the income tax by 80%. That should give anyone some pause on reading these types of polls. So thank you very much. Follow up with any questions with any of us. We'll be putting out a statement, and this video would go on YouTube later today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.